everybody, welcome back, and today we are doing a tutorial. Now, before I get into the palette that I'm using, I do want to start off by saying that I'm going to be approaching tutorials in a different way this year that I think is going to work a little bit better, where sometimes we're going to do more complicated tutorials, but a lot of the time I really just want to dig in and share my experience using a palette for the first time with you guys, just to let you know what issues I'm running into, what my general first impressions of a palette are, because I think a lot of time it takes so much time to really dig in and review a palette. And it usually takes me about 2 or 3 weeks. And I do want to do those bigger reviews, but I think because I do have so many palettes and because I buy so many palettes, I think that'd be a fun way to just kind of show you what I've bought, give you my first impressions, show you the palette in action, and, you know, let you ask questions from there. If y'all want to see a more in-depth review, we can do that too, just to kind of give you some more exposure to some different types of palettes. That being said, we are today going to be creating this look using the Lorac Vintage Glamour palette. This is a pro palette. I bought mine for $29 off the Lorac website, and I just randomly saw it because I was on the Lorac website. I didn't see anybody do reviews on this palette. I haven't seen anybody haul this palette, anybody do tutorials with this palette. I just kind of randomly found it. And I purchased this palette for $29. It is now on sale for $14.50. I was just on the website. But this is the traditional Lorac Pro palette layout. Really beautiful. It's got a nice mix of just straight up neutrals, some leaning warm, some leaning cool. You do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mattes. There's a shimmer here. You have shimmers all up here. Now, I will say there are some interesting textures in this palette that you will see as I get into the look. But if you want to see how I created this very simple look, my eye is being just a butthole today and watering and creating a whole mess. So we did a very simple look just to get an initial impression of this palette. But if you want to see how I created this very, I think, pretty simple but impactful look, then stick around. Alright guys, we're just going to jump right into the tutorial. So I started off just with my Lorac Behind the Scenes eyeshadow primer. It's usually either this or the Urban Decay Primer Potion is usually what is on my eye. So first step, I'm going to go in with my Ultimate Brow Highlighter from Wet n Wild, and I'm just going to clean up underneath my brow. This is a step I used to do all the time, and I got away from it. And now that I'm back doing it, I forgot how much I enjoyed it and how much I felt like it just really helped my look. And if you see me looking over this way, I'm just trying to make sure I'm in focus and in frame, you know, important stuff. So I'm just going to smooth that out with my F75 concealer brush from Sigma. And I feel like this is another important step with this palette, because for me there is not a full-on like brow bone shade. I feel like the lightest shade Studio has a little bit of a yellowish tint, and it's a little bit darker than my skin tone. So this is just going to kind of help lighten that under brow bone area up. I'm going to go in with my Sigma Large Fluff E50 brush, and we're going to go right into the shade Studio. And that's just going to go all over my eye. Taking my E35 fluff brush, we are now going to go into Cinema. And so you can see there are kind of more cooler tones and there are some warmer tones. So we're going to stick with the more neutral to cool tones in here. And that is just, we're just going to take that and just kind of start building up that color and that transition. Like I said, this is going to be, I think we're only using 3 or 4 shades out of this palette today, 4. And I do find that, I don't know, this is my first time using this palette, and I don't know if I'm just rusty with the Lorac formula, or if this is just being a little bit, you know, because my eyes being a pain in the ass, I'm not sure, but it feels like I have a little bit more, and that is PETA knocking everything in my life over. But I feel like I'm fighting with this formula a little bit more. Now, I haven't seen anybody review this palette or say anything about it. I know Lorac's kind of flown under the radar recently, but I feel like I'm gonna have to do, you know, really dig into this palette to see how I feel about it. It's blending out nicely, so I think it might have just been that other eye not cooperating. We just took that all the way over. Now taking my Sigma E25, this is just the blending brush. We're gonna go into this shade right here called Sunset. And we're just gonna, you know, we're just doing a basic eye look, guys. So I'm just gonna kind of apply this on that outer portion of my eye. Yeah, it is applying a lot easier over here. It's still a little bit patchier than what I'm used to, but it's still blending very nicely. And I'm just gonna work that all the way into my crease and work it up. And again, we're not taking it underneath the lash line or anything. We are just keeping it very simple today. Okay, yeah, this is blending out a lot better. So really it's just this eye is a piece of hot, juicy garbage. Okay, cool. I'm feeling better about this palette. And you guys know my love for Lorac shadows. I think I'm just a little weary of this one because, like I said, I feel like it just kind of snuck up on me and I didn't realize it was even a thing. Because, you know, Lorac should personally inform me of every time they come out with a palette. That's just rude. I'm just taking that E25 with no more product on it and we're just blending it out. Do you see what is going on with this eye? It is being a little biatch right now. Do y'all's eyes do that? Do y'all have a problem with that? It's just this eye. This eye will literally water and it looks like I am just tears rolling down my face, and then this one's fine. They can't cooperate. So now we're gonna do is we're gonna get into some of these top rows. And I'm finding with this palette, just swatching, there's a lot of almost press glitters, almost shimmery topper shades. And I was really kind of disappointed when I was swatching the palette just because they were not very pigmented. So for example, like let's look at Sequin. Sequin is really chunky. It looks pretty on the finger, but when you swatch it, it's swatching better there. But do you see how it's really chunky? So I was worried how that was going to come across, and I'm getting that a lot with a lot of the shadows in this upper row of the palette. It's not their usual beautiful formula. I mean, as you can see, they look absolutely stunning, but you can see it looks beautiful on the eye. At least I think it does. I think it looks great. But this is definitely a shadow you're going to want to wet down. So I am just going in with my Mash flat shader brush into that Sequin shade, and you can even see on the brush how it looks like it is just not picking up anything, and it's flaky and chunky. Was not very promising, but I'm going to wet this down. So this is definitely not, ooh, let's not drop that palette. So this is definitely not very impressive. But once you take that and apply it to the eye, and don't get me wrong, this is either going to be a topper shade or you're going to have to build it up. But that looks pretty I mean, that's pretty surprising considering what I was seeing on the brush and my finger swatches and just the texture in the pan. So that's pretty high impact. So I'm going to go in and build it up. And I've already dug into this shade, like just this look, because I'm just going to give y'all full disclosure. I don't know if you can tell, but just this look, I've already dug into this color quite a bit, which, you know, I've said this before, I have so much eyeshadow that that's not going to be something that keeps me up at night. But if this is, you know, the one palette that you're going to get this year, just be aware to get this impact, you're going to have to dig into these shades, and it's going to use up quite a bit of product because there's a lot of fallout, and you really have to dig in there to get this payoff. Now, when you get it, it's absolutely stunning on the eye. I mean, that's really pretty. I think so. But just be aware, because full disclosure. I'm going to take this E35 brush again and just kind of knock some of that glitter down. Again, guys, I've talked about this before. I have hooded eyes. Unless I'm doing just like a specific cut crease, I'm just not going to worry about shadow kind of transferring up into, you know, up higher on my lid. It's just going to happen. So I'm going to say I'm old and wrinkly. I'm just kind of blend that in. Another thing I'm not used to in this palette is that this is that same kind of glittery chunky type of shadow, that chiffon, what is that? That chiffon shade. So that chiffon shade is that same kind of glittery, chunky shadow, and it's not the smoothness, kind of the smooth texture that I would want for an inner corner highlight. So this is not a complete palette for me, which is weird because usually all Lorac palettes, no matter what palette I have, they are a complete palette. They have everything I need. So this is the first Lorac palette I've gotten, except for maybe the brunch palette, which I look at as an accessory palette, and the neon palette, which I look at as an accessory palette. That is not a complete palette. It's the first like full-on 12 pan pro palette. But that being said, so again, just be aware of that. I'm just going to go into my NARS dual intensity eyeshadow in Andromeda, which I love this shadow as a highlighter. I love it as an inner corner highlight. It's just a beautiful shadow. All right, guys, and that is essentially the eye look today. Really, really short and sweet, just to kind of get a taste of what this palette is providing. I'm going to just throw on some mascara on my upper lash line, throw on some falsies, and I'll be right back. So what's the look? This is the final look with the lashes. Again, I just threw on some mascara, some very simple lashes, and we used what, Studio Chiffon? No, created this look using Studio, Cinema, Sunset, and Bubbly, and then just with a little bit of help from that NARS shadow for the inner corner highlights. So again, some thoughts on this palette from initial use. I think it's absolutely beautiful. I think it threw me a little that this is not an absolutely complete palette for me, in that there is not an inner corner highlight for me, and there is not just a matte shade that is pale enough completely for me. Again, I'm translucent, so this shade is probably going to work for a majority of people. That is not enough to detract me from this eyeshadow palette, but if you are somebody who is looking for a palette that is going to be your everything, just know you're probably not going to have an inner corner highlight in here. If you are fair like I am, this is a little deep for my skin tone as far as just being an under eyebrow setting shade. Again, we made it work with that Wet n Wild pencil, so that's a trick you can use. And again, just be aware that this is some of these shades in here, this sequin shade, this bubbly shade, the chiffon shade. I feel like those three in particular are going to be a little bit tricky to work with, but they're surprisingly, from what I've seen so far, surprisingly beautiful. That sequin shade is really gorgeous. Again, know that I did have to dig into that shade. There's already, just from using this palette once, there's already a dip in that shade. It's not a significant dip, but it's there, it's visible, I can see it. So that is just something to be aware of. If this is a palette that this is going to be your one and only palette this year, or you don't have a lot of eyeshadow and you don't like a lot of kick up, or you don't like a lot of waste, these shades might be an issue for you. So just be aware of that. If you're somebody like me and you just love the Lorac formula, you're gonna love this palette. And again, I'm really, the shades on the eye are really beautiful, and I'm really happy with it, with the look I created. Again, it's very impactful. I think it's got a lot of drama and a lot of just elegance, not to toot my own horn, but it's a nice, simple, elegant, dramatic look without being over the top, and I think it's something that is very approachable. So I think this is a very approachable shadow palette that you could do all matte looks in this. You could do really bump it up. You could do something simple. You could do something classic. You could do something really blown out and smoky. So I think it is a very versatile palette. It is just not as complete of a palette as I am used to. Now, that being said, do I think this is absolutely a steal at $14.50? Yes, I do. I think this is a steal. I highly, just based on the price point, I would recommend it. But if you're somebody that is looking for an everything, your end-all be-all palette, this might not be it for you. I would recommend one of the Mega Pros. I would recommend probably the Pro 1 or the Pro 2. So those are just my thoughts on this palette. Again, for those of you who are new here, I am ride or die for Lorac. I love Lorac. They're my all-time favorite eyeshadow formula. They were my first eyeshadow love. So I do have a bias. I hope that I was as, you know, forthright and honest with you as possible. And I'm really, when I review Lorac shadows, I try and be as critical as possible, because I know the way I approach shadows is, you know, sometimes the challenge is what's fun for me. Plus, I'm very forgiving of brands like this. So, you know, just take all of that into consideration when thinking about pulling the trigger on this eyeshadow palette. But I think it's absolutely a steal for $14.50. That's banana sandwich. So I hope you guys enjoyed this format. I hope you enjoyed this look, and you can create this look with any eyeshadow palette you have, you know. So if you just like the look, pull out what you got and use it. But let me know down below if you like this format. Let me know if you're gonna pick up this palette. Maybe this is a palette you're really interested in. But all that being said, I'm gonna stop talking. I hope you guys have an amazing day, have a rocking week, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.